On collaboration that scales, connecting teams and programs via essential conversations. My name is Andy Powell, Product Evangelist for VersionOne, and I'll be moderating today's event. So hopefully most of you that are joining us attended part one of this webinar series. Actually, I had a couple people come through and say that they missed part one. You missed a great presentation by David Hussman. I'm always amazed that he's one of the most pragmatic thought leaders in the Agile space, and he kind of walked us through some of the different ways you can be effective with collaboration. We're going to do a little bit of a summary on that, so if you did miss part one, I think you'll still be able to learn a lot about his key messages today, and then also see how VersionOne can help support your collaboration. So today, Bob Vincent, a product manager at VersionOne, will be demonstrating how VersionOne does support a lot of the concepts David spoke about. So Bob, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Andy. It's great to be here. Hey, thanks, Andy. It's great to be here.
So before we get started, I'd like to review a couple of housekeeping items. This presentation will last approximately 40 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. For those of you who haven't used GoToWebinar before, you will notice at the top of the control panel on the left side, there's an orange button with double arrows. You can click this button to collapse the control panel during the presentation so it doesn't interfere with your viewing. All of your lines are muted throughout the presentation, so if you're asking questions verbally, you are talking to yourself. If you have questions, please send them in using the control panel. And at the end of the presentation, we'll answer as many questions as we have time for. Many thanks to all of you who submitted questions in advance. During the webinar, we're going to try to address many of those as we go through. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we will send you an email in a few days with a link to view the recording of today's event and to download the slides. Finally, in the spirit of true collaboration, we have added a hashtag to the slide, so AgileLIVE. If you're on Twitter and want to share your aha moments, that will be the place to do it, and that way people who are listening as well can start to talk about what they're hearing. So on that note, let's get started. And the first slide I want to show is giving a little bit of recap on what David went over. So just to recap that, he talked about three different groupings of conversations. The first grouping was conversations within a team, and think of this as your Agile team that's focused around maybe a particular project or the team focused on a certain product backlog, and he walked through different types of conversations that are important. So product conversations about what are you trying to build and for what particular user and market. The daily conversations as part of stand-up. The learning conversations where you're coming together to just understand better what you're trying to accomplish, and reflective conversations, conversations about how are things going and are we progressing in the right fashion. So that's the first group, that within that core Agile team. Then he also spoke about conversations across teams, and this here, this layer, he talked about what is a program. So that's where multiple teams are coming together to deliver a single product or a single system, and you start to have cross-cutting concerns. The product may be something that spans those teams. The teams have to do coordination and manage their dependencies, and you also have to be thinking about how architecture and technology fit into this picture. And the final grouping he talked about was outside the team. So at that portfolio level, the bigger questions we need to ask as a business, how are we connecting to our users who in a lot of cases may be buying our software, or how are we connecting to our users if it's an internal solution to make sure we're providing them what they really need to be effective for the business. And also, what are we using to make those investment kinds of decisions? How are we structuring those conversations? And then finally, leadership conversations. So how is the leadership within our organization connecting to the rest of the software development group? So that was the framework he set up for us, and today what we wanted to do is just kind of walk through that and share how VersionOne can support conversations at those different levels. And we're going to start at the top within a team, and to give you some context for, hey, what did he talk about in a little more detail here, I wanted to show a picture that David had shared with you of actually the VersionOne stand-up. So at our office here in Atlanta, this is just downstairs for us, the development stand-up here. And he talked through some strategies that you can use in stand-up. And one of the key points that David made was that stand-up is a ceremony, and we need to make sure we're not just following the ceremony, but we're really getting back to what's the purpose of this meeting. And below, he talked about some of the strategies for that, which is talking to the wall, which may sound a little strange for you who missed it. So that the idea is instead of talking about what you did, let's focus on the stories that are on our wall here. Ask the silent 5 whys. So rather than really getting to the root cause in your mind as a coach around why people are behaving a certain way in the stand-up, as opposed to putting them on the spot sometimes. And then also some strategies for just making sure you're not solving problems in stand-up, but you are doing just enough to share your discoveries. And so I wanted to turn it over to Bob, because Bob, I'm not sure if you can see him in this picture, but actually you can. He's right there, blurred out in the middle. But he does join our stand-up, and David had brought it up as something he thought was useful. So before we jump into showing you how we're using the different aspects of VersionOne, I wanted to let Bob kind of share how stand-up works for us and some of the technology we have supporting it. So Bob, over to you.
Okay, and yeah, it's pretty interesting from David's note about not turning, even though it is a ceremony, something that you do regularly, you don't want stand-up to turn into some sort of status report. And the VersionOne team is constantly evolving and growing and learning. And we went from a point where we were doing the 3-question scrum, but once it did start sounding like a status report, we moved on to sharing interesting moments around the things that we were working on, such as new designs, struggles we were facing, new technologies that one pair might be introducing, and that the rest of the team knows about. So taking a moment every day to go over those sorts of points with the rest of the team, and we found that to be pretty useful. Now, status is still important, but fortunately the board shows that for us. And as you can see in this picture here, again, this is the actual VersionOne team. We're gathered around, in this case, our Epic board, but at times we've used a storyboard as well. So we can see what status, what state the different work items are currently in. And if something's sitting there for a long time, that might promote one sort of discussion. But otherwise, we get that view collectively just looking at the board. Technology-wise, that's pretty interesting for us, because we do have some distributed people as well as a distributed team and a large co-located group. So we go through a lot of different technology. Currently, we're working with Skype, GoToMeeting, HipChat, and we also have various approaches for microphones. You actually can see some of those here. Pretty interesting. We try to capture the entire room, and those lines dangling from the ceiling are actually microphones hovering around and being fed into a mixing board. So maybe a tad elaborate, but it's working pretty well for us so far. Then, of course, we're also using VersionOne. So let's take a look at that and how VersionOne is being used by teams to collaborate. Well, just a moment, please. Okay, so stand-up being a core collaboration for every team really is still something that's done differently for different teams, especially depending on your methodology. Scrum teams, for example, tend to be very people-focused, where everyone's answering the 3 questions. Here we're looking at VersionOne team rooms, and it really helps out here by showing you the team's task board as well as the people on the team. So up top, I'm looking at all of the people on my team. It's also very handy, particularly in stand-up, because I can click on a member, and the board will filter to show me just the items that they own or tasks that they're working on. So this is pretty useful for running an efficient stand-up, but it's also nice that I've heard from customers who've been using this, where they tell us that it's also reducing the amount of time that people spend preparing for stand-up. I mean, stand-up's still something you want to come in and prepare for, but this takes a lot of the manual steps that they were going through to sort of recap what was going on yesterday. So it saves a lot of time. Kanban teams might take a slightly different approach, where they might lay out they're tracking their work maybe only down to a story level. So they might be using a storyboard view in Team Room. And because they're focusing on work items, they may choose to run their stand-up that way as well. So here we've configured the board to have an expedite lane on the top. So it probably makes sense that this team would go through and talk about those issues first. Another approach is to, if you are doing stand-up by work items, to work right to left. And this is interesting because you're focusing first on what's needed to complete those stories. You know, the ones that are pretty close, you know, maybe this is wrapping up, you know, nice to just shut that down, get that finished, and before we move on and spend a lot of time on things that are just ramping up. So another key attribute of collaboration is a sense of being connected. Team Room really helps out here. First, you have a representation of your team, and that's up here in the top left. We call it a mascot. Just about every dev team I've ever worked with or visited from a customer perspective has some sort of team mascot, and it's usually hanging out somewhere in the office. You know, it's a real thing. So we wanted to let teams be able to capture that and represent that even in a software tool. Then the most important thing for being connected is being connected to the people on the team. So it's great to see everyone here. And this is huge when you're distributed, but it's also nice even for co-located teams. You can use a photo of yourself or something that reflects your personality. And it may seem like a simple thing, but really gives people a chance to express themselves. And one story from a customer that really still to this day stands out to me a lot was someone who said that team rooms helped them feel like they were in a small, focused team, even though they were in a pretty large environment where they might otherwise get lost in the crowd. So let me switch back to my Scrum team here. And you can get a sense, you know, as I switch between these different rooms of, you know, a different sense of personality and size of the team and the people. But then, you know, there's also being connected to your team's product. Team Room tells you a lot on one page. So here you have visuals for things. Let me focus on the entire team. So I see things like blocking issues. The storyboard shows other things such as threshold indicators to let me know if something's been sitting too long. I've got progress indicators going down the right here telling me how my tests and tasks are progressing. And these indicators are really useful because it's going to act as a trigger to let you know that it's time to have a conversation with someone. So another big part of being connected is having context. Dave pointed this out in his presentation last week, but context really helps guide people toward common goals. So Team Room gives you context of what's coming up in your backlog. So not only what we're working on in the current iteration, but this backlog panel shows me what the product owner has prioritized as the next highest priority things. So these are going to start slowing in. We also have a view just kind of going left from right. Once things drop off the board and have been completed, we still have a panel that shows us that. And that's pretty useful because sometimes people feel like, you know, they're going postal. They're just completing tasks or pulling stories. And it's easy to lose sight of what you've accomplished. And I think we've had some feedback here too, where the closed items panel really does help people kind of reflect on just, you know, how much customer value they're delivering and what's been delivered when. So useful, a lot of uses for that. The recent changes panel is another area for giving good context where you can see what's been changed and who did that and when. So that might promote a conversation with someone as well. Team Room also acts as an information radiator. So if we look at the top, we can see the team's average velocity as well as a velocity trend. We also get an idea on this graph on the right over here of the team's burn down. And these are in a location where everyone sees it. So it's helping provide context and really keep everybody on the same page. So another interesting part about context, of course, is conversations. And we provide that here in the team room as well. We realize that like not everyone knows everything a project up front. So you're learning as you go. There's an idea of progressive elaboration when something comes in from an idea to an epic down to a story and task. You're learning and you're refining our understanding. So our users tell us they find it useful to quickly capture this learning directly with a particular item for a later time. For example, you might be estimating a story. You're discussing relevant details about an item that, even though you're not going off and creating a solution or doing any development, something comes up during the conversation that's going to be useful for a later time. So it's nice to be able to start a conversation directly on an item and keep that for a later time. In this case, on this story here, is an example of something like that. So, in estimating it, maybe Andre noted that this is pretty similar to something we had in the past. But then other people can come along and update that with more information. So as things change in the system and you learn more, you're able to capture that here and keep track of it with the items. So very useful for coming back later on. So let's take a look at across teams.
Sure, thanks, Bob. So we had a couple questions come through, and I was just Hi, everyone. Thanks, Bob, and sorry for the audio problem. I did want to point out that for you, those of you who are on Enterprise Edition or Ultimate Edition, you do have access to team rooms, but you need to be on the fall 2012 release. So that is an important consideration for those of you who are current customers and looking at what's going on. So wanted to switch gears now and focus a little bit more on the across teams and what that means. So across teams, David talked about that being part of a program, and that's where we get into his main message there was that just because you have more people doesn't mean you're going to get collaboration just to work, right? When you have a small group, you've got small group dynamics going on, and the cross-cutting conversations when you have a lot of people, it starts to require some real effort. One of the things that stuck out to me as he spoke was that he said what he's realized is that as soon as there's more than two teams, it's more than twice as hard to really maintain that collaboration across the group. He also spoke a little bit about how you're creating your teams and how they're formed. It varies quite a bit. Sometimes it's more of a producer-consumer approach. Other times you have multiple teams that maybe work on this overarching big product, and they're just focused around different functional areas. So we're really here focused on that program when we talk about cross-cutting concerns that is trying to deliver a particular value to the market or the customer or the user, and how do we get everyone to work together to make sure you can do that holistically in the best way possible. And so that was a little bit of just summary for what David had talked through. And so, Bob, I wanted to turn it back over to you so you could show how VersionOne supports some of those conversations.
Sure. And, yeah, cross-team collaboration is typically challenging, but VersionOne helps out here. So let's take a look at over in our dedicated conversations page. And here I'll show you a little how you can collaborate with people from all over your organization in various cross-cutting patterns. So in this page, you can participate in conversations from various team rooms. So Here we're looking at team rooms from that we saw actually physically before, but we're seeing the streams come in from here. We also have spaces, and you can also collaborate directly with people. There's also a home stream if you want to pull everything together in one consolidated view. In the conversations page, we also make it a little bit easier for you to sift through some of the things. So there's a filter here that can show you just the conversations where like you've been mentioned or you've participated. But if you also want to just kind of keep up with everything that's going on, you can see all of the conversations there as well. So I can jump around and not just the team rooms where I'm working, but I can also see what's going on with other teams inside my organization. Now, spaces are another aspect of conversations, and they're interesting because they don't really have a project or team boundary like Team Room. So this accommodates having a broader pool of people discussing topics together. And this is a pretty important way of enriching your collaboration, and it's something that we're going to be building upon in our next release. So just a little teaser about some new features coming up in our summer release, where you'll be able to collaborate through conversations with people even outside of your VersionOne community. So wrapping that up and really looking forward to getting that out for you. So back to spaces, though. So perhaps you've got test-driven development as a new practice in your organization. Different teams are experiencing it for the first time, getting their feet wet, and you've got maybe like different team leads from those different projects. They're all able to join a space such as this and share tips, raise issues that they're having, and help each other out. So, regardless of where they are organizationally and team-wise. So space is a perfect place to host such discussions and serve as an archive later for when other new groups or new people onboard. You can come back and refer to those lessons learned in those discussions without it being captured, in someone's, email folder or some other more direct, more private communication. Conversations is very open and has a lot of value in that regard for new people coming on and being able to get up to speed. Another example of a team room might be something like this, of a space might be this release space where people of various roles and teams can get together and discuss common goals. So that's what we're trying to get across with spaces, and the people in that release space are probably also getting a lot of cross-team understanding over in this other feature that we call Epic Timeline. So here we can visually see epics, in this case at the program level in our organization, such that many different teams are working on them. It's also useful at a smaller scale or even a larger portfolio scope. So we see a lot of context here. We see the different epics that we're working on, that the organization is working on. We can see when they're planned to begin, when they plan to wrap up, the size, or what we call the swag, and how those epics are progressing. So this allows for a lot of planning across different groups and to see how different groups are doing together toward common goals, toward a common product. Another interesting cross-cutting view is over here, our dependency diagram. So for a selected project scope, here you can see all of the story dependencies. I see which stories need to start, which are waiting, and which have blocking issues. I can also see scheduling conflicts. So there's a lot being told here, and seeing these different issues and these different relationships will motivate a conversation between different teams to better understand each other's concerns and figure out what planning changes might need to occur. So let's jump back over to questions on that, Eddie. Sure.
Thanks, Bob. No, I don't think anything came through that we want to make sure we cover here. So wanted to move forward and talk a little bit about outside the teams. So as David talked through outside the teams, he touched on a couple of different concepts, and so one of the screenshots that we pulled from his earlier presentation we thought was really encapsulated a lot of the discussion there, was this visual for the lean startup vision, which talks about really having this divide between the problems and solutions. And so you have this hypothesis about a problem that might be something worth solving. You may be getting some insights around that from data you have. Then you go ahead and create a solution. And as you're starting to create the solution, you have to be saying, well, what's the best problem to solve, which gets you to that next best investment thinking, where you want to have the right kinds of insights and data feeding into those decisions. And this cycle is something that really it happens in the startup community very fast. In a large organization, it might not be happening quite as quickly, and there's much more people involved. But you still need to have those core fundamentals of being able to say, how do we know what really is going to be valuable? How are we learning about what our users want? So that gets to having the data and feedback and insights coming back from what you have delivered out into your user population. So a couple of key concepts there that David had talked about, and instead of just kind of thinking we know the right answer, really validating that it is something that is correct, using data to drive a lot of the way that we're delivering software. So with that background, Bob, I want to turn it back over to you so you can walk us through how VersionOne can support some of those outside the team concepts.
Sure. So in VersionOne's Ultimate Edition, we have a kind of a complementary product called Ideas. What we're looking at here is actually us, VersionOne, using Ideas to capture voice of the customer from our own customer base. So Ideas is great for capturing that, for capturing the voice of the customer, getting outside the office, sort of, in a software kind of way. But it also gives your customers a means of collaborating with each other. So that makes it even more powerful than just, product owner, product manager getting out and talking to individual customers. Here you've got customers collaborating with each other to better understand each other's needs. So here your outside customers can enter their ideas. Other people can then come in and vote on them or comment, and this is where the customer collaboration comes back. Sometimes here, it's just people piling on and agreeing that this is a good idea. But other times, someone has more detail that they want to express, or a different perspective where the original idea maybe doesn't quite solve their problem, and they express their difference a little bit better. Or maybe it's actually like not such a great idea. We're building a single product here, so we're trying to find what works well for most people. And sometimes someone's idea just doesn't jive quite right with the overall product strategy. And it's interesting to see sometimes that other customers will actually come in and point that out. So as an ideas administrator, so you also have the opportunity to take part in these conversations within Ideas, directly with your customer. So as a product manager myself, I get a lot of insight from looking at the various ideas and the comments on our Ideas instance. It's very useful for planning and prioritizing our backlogs. And then it also gets kind of interesting, and sort of back to that slide that David had, where he was showing what's going on outside the office, and that's important. But then there's also the development cycles going on, and there's a lot of feedback loops there as well. So one thing that I will do when it actually comes time, then we're developing something, and it's something that came from Idea Space, I'll come back and I'll look at the people who had posted this or people who had posted comments, and actually follow up with them, get in contact with them, and involve them in our ideas around prototyping and getting a general design in place to just get some validation and more feedback, more detail about what was really going on for that customer when they posted that idea. We also involve people more closely, outside customers, in user testing. So once we get beyond just scoping out a design and some high-level epics, we get some UIs going, and we get our users back in place and do user testing where they have a chance to actually test out our working code and provide their feedback and validation. So it's really nice being able to bring the customer back at that level of process development. So you got a lot of ideas. VersionOne makes it easy for you to manage these ideas and feed them into your backlog. So over time, you start to build up an opportunity backlog of epics. And given their large size and how fuzzy they might tend to be, it's sometimes difficult to figure out what you should be doing next. And where's your next investment? So we have a report on our epics called the Epic Bubble Chart, and that offers some help. The bubble chart visually depicts 4 different attributes to help you plan. They include the value, the complexity, the size of effort, and the priority. So here I see a high priority epic that's it's marked as high priority, but it's less valuable than the other lower priority epics. So the color, the purple here, indicates that this was determined to be high priority, but the value is lower than some of these others. So that stands out as a little weird looking at this. And something like this would be a great trigger to have a conversation with the owner of that epic to better understand what they had in mind with that, and possibly recalibrate that epic amongst the others that were overall planning. The last thing that I wanted to show you today is something else that's coming up from our summer release, and we're calling it planning rooms. So this is where we are currently in development, but much like Team Room, Planning Room gives you program and portfolio teams, gives them a single place to share context and collaborate at higher levels. So we're really looking forward to getting that same energy that the Team Room has generated and the value that it's providing for development teams, to be able to get that up for the higher level planning teams as well. So that'll be coming out soon.
All right, thanks, Bob. We've kind of gotten through those 3 layers in terms of presenting the ways VersionOne can support collaboration. And hopefully, for those of you who are current VersionOne users, you found some new ways you might use VersionOne and get more from your collaboration that you're currently having in your organization. Maybe streamlining it a bit. And for those of you who aren't currently using VersionOne, hopefully you found it to be insightful and point out some areas within your collaboration and where you might improve. So before we get to Q&A for our presentation, I would like to highlight a few next steps. So we are coming out with a new release, as Bob had touched on. That's going to be out in just a few weeks, so take a look at that. It's going to be in your inbox here and shortly. So next thing is, if you are new to VersionOne, the best way to kind of learn more is to start a trial. That's really what we do, is help people understand how VersionOne would fit into their organization and help manage their agile software development. Another possible thing you could do is join the VersionOne Agile Managers Forum on LinkedIn. This is where we're going to be posting the recording and slides from today's presentation. It's also a good place if you're wanting to collaborate further with those who attended today, that you might start a conversation. And we're continuing these AgileLIVE webinar series. So that'll be the last thing I leave you with is look for the next one. That'll be coming out soon. And at this point, we did want to just let everyone know that we are going to spend a few minutes answering questions. We had a few come through, but if you were sitting there saying, hey, I'd like to just hold those questions till the end, now would be the time to submit them through the GoToWebinar question and answer section. And the first one, I wanted to kind of step back into Team Room because we did have a couple questions on that. And one of those got to someone saying, hey, I think they were looking at having the team members at the top of the Team Room as being something that's pretty valuable, and so they were saying, well, how do I make sure I get the people that are working on those stories to be displayed at the top of the room? And so, Bob, I thought maybe you could just go through a little bit on, how do you set up a Team Room?
Sure. Let me hop back to our VersionOne instance here. So from a Team Room, someone who is a project lead or higher can administer Team Room settings. So they will have this link that comes into to the Team Room. Here is where you set up the project scope. So this is really nice in that if you've got a large project tree and maybe your developers and testers are getting kind of confused navigating through that, Team Room nails that down to exactly one slice of the scope such that they never have to come in and set it. But to answer your question, there's also a tab on here for membership. So anybody in the system could be a member of the Team Room, and you simply come into the membership tab and add the folks in who want to join. So once I've added them, then that person will then appear with the rest of the team.
Great, and I think you made the point earlier, Bob, that people that aren't on the Team Room can still see what's going on in the Team Room and access it, correct?
That is correct. If they have project access to that particular part of the project tree defined to the Team Room, then they could also come in and see the Team Room.
Okay, and we had another question come through around Team Room, so since we're right here, and it was around the filtering, and I think there was someone had noticed that when you filtered to Danny, that it seemed to be more than just Danny's work was showing up, so there's still some work showing up from other people, and so maybe a little bit of insight into kind of why certain things are showing up. So like I think in this example we're still seeing some tasks for Klaus, for example, that update documentation task. So what's the thinking behind why we took that approach?
Sure, good question. The reason we did that is, and this really only stands out on the task board where you've got a relationship of items. In this case, it's somewhat confusing if you were to take away all of that other context that's around this particular story. So like in this case, I've filtered down to Danny. He owns a story, so that's there. But up on the one on top, he has some tasks, but if we were to only show create performance and build UI, then that would get kind of confusing. So we certainly want to bring the story along to kind of provide that envelope of context. And the other tasks were left in there as well based on some feedback we had when we were first implementing this feature. People wanted to have more context, but being able to narrow down to see that Danny is working basically in these two stories was sufficient. So if you were on the storyboard, for example, then things are going to become a little more direct given that we're only looking at one level of item on the board.
Okay. Looking at some other questions here, and we had one around explain a bit around the roadmap. I saw it on the screen while you were showing release planning for cross teams, and I think it was just that's referring back to the timeline view. So could you maybe talk through how this is a roadmap? Because I'm not sure exactly what the confusion was, but just from the perspective of how is the timeline view, how can it be used as a roadmap?
So this is a little different than road mapping in that here I'm really only looking at things that I've identified as epics. A roadmap could be a little more broad to include things like interesting events. You know, maybe there's an important conference in your field, in your domain. You want to put something like that on your roadmap and then start to plan big things around that. You might also want to put very vague things that really don't have very well defined, but still want to stub them out and get those into a forward-looking plan. Here, this is a much more tactical view of looking at epics, and I can see here it's still based on a timeline, and that's a useful view for people to help them plan and get a sense of how much we've got going on. So as I scroll down, one thing I didn't show was down here at the bottom of the timeline, where we can show graphically the cumulative swag, the total swag of all of these epics, and again, that's kind of their size, how much an epic would cost, and compare that to actual story estimates that are rolling up, and we start getting an idea of how well we might be overloaded, or how well we're tuned in that sort of capacity. It also correlates our particular releases. So you have a release defined in the system, and we're able to show that against this line as well. So it gives us a sense of release planning at an epic level.
Okay, thanks, Bob. And it did have a question come through around someone had noticed the published timeline on the upper right, and they were saying kind of what's that for? So could you maybe go into how that works and kind of what publishing means for the timeline?
Absolutely. So your timeline is a useful planning and status tool for the people that are inside of version 1. But sometimes you've got people that aren't going to that are going to want to have more access to that, or you want to just take this so that they don't have to navigate through the system to see it. So here we're able to publish to pass around to other people a view of the timeline, such that they don't have to go through the system, set their project scope just right, find everything. Here I can just send this out, and people are looking directly at it. So it's a great way of, again, kind of providing context and keeping everyone on the same page.
All right, yeah, and we actually, just as you were talking about that, we had a question come through about information readers that could be used for customers and stakeholders, and I think that's in a lot of ways the epic timeline becomes that level of detail where it makes sense. So hopefully we answered that question to some extent. But we also had I think a similar question that from Kim. She was saying, for program level collaborative space for conversations, so if I'm at the program level and I want to just give a place for people to collaborate, do I just set up a team room with larger membership, or what would be the right approach for doing that sort of collaboration? And I guess as I read that, one question I had was, well, I'm not sure what group within the program that she was focused on. And it kind of felt like it was a little bit getting back to the David's question or image around, are we looking for something where everyone across the program can be talking to each other, or is there a particular subgroup that has a clear focus within that larger set of people that might be talking? But if you could just cover the different aspects there of that question around, if I have a larger program and I want people to be talking, what are the different paths that would make sense from VersionOne in a conversations perspective?
Sure. So at the program level, again, this is not a feature that we have out today, but coming in our summer release very soon, planning rooms are going to be a great place to hone that type of conversation where, again, you're building a team, but it's not a team of developers and testers, but it's more people working at program and even portfolio layers. So you'll be able to have a place for that group of people, and you'll be able to host and see conversations inside of that context the same way that you could in a team room. So I think that's probably going to be the most natural and solid fit to answer Kim's question. Another approach could be in conversations at large, and this is what we have out today, where you could set up a space and you can invite people to a space. So if it's a small group that you want to keep focused on this particular topic, you could create a space, invite those people to it, but it's not going to close it off to other people. And the conversations are still open, so other people would be able to explore and see what's going on here. But you could also invite people, which is going to send them an email invitation to come into the space, notify them that this discussion is going on, and they'll be able to take part as well. So I think we kind of offer the best of both worlds in that balance of openness, yet having the right people to keep a productive conversation going.
Okay, thanks, Bob. And Joanne had been asking a question saying, hey, I'm a user, and I don't see the timeline view, and so that is a hot off the presses. The Epic timeline is part of Ultimate Edition, and we rolled that out in our last release. So for any of you who are saying, well, I'm not seeing everything, that's a good time to maybe go back and look at your current version and think about moving forward and doing an upgrade, which for most people would be included. It's just something you have to reach out and get done. But getting back to, for some of you who are enterprise users, if you're not on Ultimate Edition, so for the across the team kind of capability, some of those capabilities are delivered with enterprise. And then some of those that Bob showed were part of Ultimate Edition, specifically like the dependencies visualization. For the outside the team, those capabilities are something that are, I think, solely within the Ultimate Edition. So if you were saying, hey, that the outside the team capabilities were something that looked good, and you're on Enterprise, then you'd want to go look into what all is part of Ultimate Edition. There was also a question around just doing a trial that came through. So while I'm talking more about how the tools delivered perspective, someone had just said if you start a trial, you get to keep your data already entered. And yes, we definitely you can export the data from VersionOne. It's pretty easy to do from all the different screens, and yeah, that's an avenue you could take. All right, so just looking back through our list of questions here.
So there was also a question from John about is there a free version? And so we do offer a free team edition, and that contains a lot of things that you saw here, including the boards as well as the conversations platform.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Bob. There's a couple of other questions around just the cards and configuration within the team rooms. And so that may be something worth hitting. The one question was around I did not see the VersionOne task numbering system on the Scrum or Kanban boards. Could you show these? And yeah, could you just talk a little bit about how the cards themselves? There was also about card configuration options. Kim had asked how those are configurable within the different board views.
Oh yeah, sure. So yeah, we do offer a lot of configuration options. You know, we don't want to necessarily impose our own workflow. You know, we want to accommodate yours, and as your workflow grows and changes, you're going to want to be able to have the tool match that. So like here on the storyboard, the columns that you see going across, those are coming from our the status field that we have defined in the system, and there are the fields set up for that. So I could go into the administration side of things, add a new status value, and that would show up as a new column. But perhaps status isn't really what's interesting to me. You know, maybe I'm more on type or priorities, something like that. I could change to priority and run a board that works like that. So here I've got the exact same cards. They all have a priority value, and now I get a board representation that shows that view. There are a lot of other interesting customizations here. That Kanban team I showed had rows going across. It had an expedite lane. That can come from this group by feature. So in that case, it was a class of service. So maybe the Scrum team wants to start using that too. They could add it here. At the moment, none of their items happen to share, have that value, so they all show up as none. But you could go through, change the story to expedite, and then you would see that lane appear. Some other things that you could do are dot colors. So maybe priority is something that's interesting, although not as columns. So I could use priority as a dot that would then show up on each of my cards, and visually I could get an idea of, okay, where are the high, the mediums, and the lows. You have card options. So we've got some things that we always want to have on the card, the ID and the title as a way to reference it. But then we've got these three other sections, the bottom left, the bottom right, and then there's this little tab, or I call it a nub, down at the bottom. So owner with avatar is a pretty popular thing, being able to actually see the owners of these stories on the cards. But I could change that to just owner, and maybe estimate isn't very important to me. I could put another field on there, and that way I could see other data. Again, it depends on what's important to me. I could also show something like the epic, a parent epic. And in this case, I can then kind of scan the board and get a better idea of, if I'm tracking things by epics, I'm doing a lot of epic breakdown, I can see that, okay, we're doing some things for inline reporting, order check, order shipping, returns, and so forth, and get an idea just glancing at the board. So those are things that can all be customized at every different level of your project in the main system, and every different team room. So each team room can have their own customizations, such that another team's not imposing upon them. You can also have policies on the team room. So this is kind of interesting, and if you noticed in the customization page when I had that up, this was down at the bottom. It's just a free-form text, and I can describe some sort of behavior or policy for how the team intends to work. So maybe they've done a retrospective, they've got some commitments, and they want to firm up maybe what it takes, what it means for a card to move from in progress to done. And they've all committed that all the unit tests and acceptance tests are passing. But they want to capture that here in the policy and the board, and then that way other people can refer to that.
All right.
So I hope
Bob.
That answers that. Sure.
Yeah, no, I think that was helpful. We also have a question come through around security, saying, can we control access to certain areas? And in terms of security goes through projects, so rather than showing that, just to give you that insight, and that's something that can be done. Then two other questions that came through around conversations. And the first one was, can we have anonymous conversations? And then the second one was, how can I see conversations that are around a particular story or task or person? So how do I get those more filtered views within conversations? So let's wrap those up, and I know we're getting close to 1 o'clock, so if you do have any other questions, please send them through now.
Okay, so good question. So the first one about can you post an anonymous conversation? No, we don't really support that. It's important, again, to have context of not only what's being said, but who said it. And we've never really had a problem or a situation where a customer has thought that to be a bad approach. Always good to have some accountability and some reference to know who's talking. Now the question about stories in that side, we do offer a number of different ways of giving back the information, and that's one of the really powerful aspects of conversations. Is not just that it's like another chat channel, but instead that it is tied to the things that already exist in your work system. So, and you can see that from the different ends of those things. So in this case, I'm in conversations, but I can see where someone has mentioned a story and an epic. I can quickly go out to those items from the conversation. Now, likewise, if I'm in the context of something like a story or whatnot, then I can also get back there as well. So here, when I bring up the Enter RMA story, I scroll down, I see all of the conversations that have mentioned this story in the past. So if there's been any replies, all of that's chained together, and I'm able to see the entire conversation threads. So it's really useful for catching up and seeing the entire history, really, of what's gone on specifically about this one thing. And that is true for really anything that you can mention in the system, which is pretty broad: stories, defects, tests, projects, people. So if I bring up a detail view for a person, then I also similarly have a filtered view of all of the things that where I've started something where that person has participated in the conversation, or where they've been mentioned as well. So we try to make it as powerful as possible by connecting the work items in the system with the conversation and giving you views from both of those different perspectives.
All right, thanks, Bob. And I think we're almost at 1 o'clock Eastern, so I wanted to thank Bob just in general for walking through how VersionOne supports some of those conversations, and also David Hussman's not here, but he did a great job last week. As we mentioned, we're going to be posting out the slides in the Agile Managers Forum, and thank you guys for joining today that did attend. Look forward to bring you another AgileLIVE webinar in the near future. Good afternoon, everyone.